Alright, apologies if this sounds like ass. I'm recording this at like 1 AM and allergies are kicking my ass. Hello, and welcome back to Discomfort Films. Well, it's spooky season, and it is once again time for my annual tradition on this channel where I take a look at a handful of films from a particular subgenre that I feel deserve more attention. The first year I covered found footage, the second year was vampires, and this year the theme is folk horror. So what the hell is folk horror anyway? Folk horror is kind of a broad subgenre of horror that typically involves folklore, superstitions, and paganism and other religions. While there are too many supernatural or religious horror films to name, what sets folk horror apart is the focus on the beliefs and the rituals, and a common theme is the conflict between different belief systems like Christianity versus paganism, science versus superstition, the old ways versus the new ways, and so on. Folk horror has been having a moment for the last decade, with popular recent releases like The Witch and Midsommar, as well as renewed interest in classics like The Wicker Man. If you're interested in learning more, I would definitely recommend the documentary Woodlands, Dark and Days Bewitched. It's a long and comprehensive exploration of the history of the genre that I really should have watched earlier in my research. So without further ado, here are 6 folk horror films that I believe deserve more love this Halloween season. Edge of the Knife. Edge of the Knife takes place in the 19th century on the island of Haida Gwaii in northwest Canada. Based on a traditional Haida story, the film is about a man named Aditsi who accidentally kills his friend's son on a fishing trip and runs away into the woods, gradually becoming a wild man. The film uses the original tale to explore themes of grief, guilt, and reconciliation. I like that it follows both Aditsi descending into the wild man and the community reacting and processing the death. It's also cool seeing aspects of a culture and folklore that isn't often shared with outsiders or represented accurately. This is the first feature film made entirely in the Haida language, which at the time of production had fewer than 20 living speakers. The idea for the film came out of a desire to preserve and promote the teaching of the endangered language. In Canada, the film is available to stream on CBC Gem and Starz. Tilbury. In 1940s Iceland, a young man working for the British Army reconnects with his childhood sweetheart, but finds out that she's having an affair with a British soldier. However, he begins to suspect that the man is actually a Tilbury, an imp from Icelandic folklore that is created by women to suck milk from other people's cows and goats and puke up evil butter. This was a made-for-TV movie and definitely has that quality about it at times, but it's still pretty well made and manages to have a decent atmosphere while still having fun with the sillier elements of the story. On one hand, the film explores the cultural conflict between the Icelandic and British people during the World War II occupation, and on the other hand, it's about a guy getting cucked by an imp who projectile vomits green butter. Add in a neat dance sequence, pit hair representation, and a hamster, and this movie truly has something for everyone. And it's only an hour long, so it won't take up much of your time. Tilbury is available on Shudder. She-Wolf, aka Wilczyca. This film takes place in 1948 Poland, where a soldier's wife curses him on her deathbed and promises to return to torment him in the form of a she-wolf. This movie is very slow-paced, but it is atmospheric as hell. The locations and sets are beautiful, and it really sells you on this brutal winter setting. There's this scene where they're traveling through fog that I particularly love. It just looks incredible. It's a unique take on a werewolf film with what I assume is more of the traditional folklore, but of course you still need a silver bullet. Also, despite the aforementioned slow pace of the rest of the film, it has a wild ending that goes from 0 to 60 in like 2 minutes, and the final shot is great. Wilczyca is available on Shudder. Mystics in Bali. In Mystics in Bali, an anthropologist named Kathy and her boyfriend travel to Bali to learn about black magic and discover a shape-shifting witch called Liak who accepts Kathy as an apprentice. However, the knowledge of course comes with a price. While the story and characters are pretty bare bones, the movie more than makes up for it with sheer absurdity. I don't want to give too much away, but my favorite scene in the entire movie was definitely the one involving a flying head and a pregnant lady, if you know, you know. The practical effects, even if they aren't technically the best, are still really fun and charming, and the whole movie has this campy energy to it that I really enjoyed. The English dub is corny, but that adds to the charm, and the voice of the witch is hilarious. Mystics in Bali is available on YouTube. The Dybbuk. 2 best friends in a Jewish community, Sender and Nissen, find out their wives are expecting and vow to marry the children if they're a boy and a girl despite warnings from a mysterious figure. However, tragedy strikes when Nissen drowns in a storm the day his son is born and Sender's wife dies giving birth to their daughter. Years later, the son, Hanan, and the daughter, Leah, meet again and feel drawn to each other despite the vow being forgotten, but Leah is already betrothed to someone else. Hanan, a mystic who studies Kabbalah, resorts to dark magic and mysteriously dies, and returns on Leah's wedding night as a Dybbuk to possess her. This is more of a drama with supernatural elements than a horror film, but it still deals heavily with folklore and possession, and it's my video, so neener neener. It takes quite a while to build up, and the first act in particular spends most of its time establishing all these characters and their histories, but it is important later on, and I still found it fairly engaging. It feels like a showcase of culture and folklore without really giving a fuck about genre, which I really liked. There's the drama, there's the supernatural stuff, but it's also a romance, and it's not a musical, but there are some songs in it that I really enjoyed. The film is also very well shot and staged. I particularly liked the whole wedding sequence and the part where Leah is dancing with the guy dressed up as Death, and it turns into Hanan in particular. The acting is definitely more old-fashioned and theatrical, but I still enjoyed the performances too. The Dybbuk is available on YouTube. Poison for the Fairies. A rich new girl at school, Flavia, befriends another girl named Veronica who has a fascination with witches. Veronica convinces Flavia that she's a real witch and manipulates her into helping her cast spells. The games start off innocent, but gradually escalate as Veronica demands more and more from Flavia. What I appreciate the most about this movie is how it immerses you in the child's perspective of the world. The movie is really focused on this toxic friendship between these two girls, and there are adults in the movie, but they're filmed in a way where you almost never see their faces, which I thought was really cool. The storyline is really interesting too. There's definitely like a relatability to it, at least from my experience. Like, this movie definitely calls to mind being at sleepovers as a little kid where we would play Bloody Mary and pretend to do magic spells and end up actually scaring ourselves even though it's all bullshit. It thankfully didn't end like this movie does, though. This movie has a surprisingly dark ending that I really dig. It's kind of cathartic in a way after watching like all the shit Veronica puts Flavia through, but at the same time it's like, damn, they're just kids. This is one of those movies where there's nothing supernatural going on, it's all psychological, but that's another thing that's helped by, I think, making the movie about kids, because, like, kids really do get wrapped up in this kind of thing, like this stuff feels real to them. So I think that made the stakes feel more realistic, I guess. Poison for the Fairies is available on Shudder. Alright, so those were my picks for 6 underrated folk horror movies for Halloween. If you've seen any of these movies, I'm curious what you think, or if you have any that I left out that you'd recommend. The research for this video was definitely more of a challenge than the last couple Halloween videos. I was struggling to find films that were niche enough that I feel cool concluding them, but not too niche that they were impossible to find. Like, there was this one film I was looking at, but literally all I could find online was like a literal VHS rip with no English subtitles. I also tried to make it more international than the last couple Halloween videos, which I was kind of disappointed mostly just included Western English-speaking films. And I think especially if you're looking at films involving, like, folklore, I thought that watching a bunch of stuff from different cultures would be really interesting, and it was. So, while it definitely made the research and curating the videos a lot more challenging than usual, I think it paid off. And even though I obviously watched, like, a shitload of horror movies in general, there are still, like, entire subgenres and niches that I barely touched, and these videos are a fun way to finally get around to them. So, once again, thank you for watching, happy Halloween, goodbye.